And now, the document lifecycle. It was really important once I understood that we could articulate what is happening to documents in a law firm using the concept of the document lifecycle. Because if I could articulate it, I could explain it to my staff and to the lawyers. And once we could do that, we could all get on board regarding how information was processed when it got into our law firm. The document lifecycle begins with ESI arriving at the firm in whatever form it arrives. But let's just take it from the client. The client sends you a bunch of evidence. Immediately, that information needs to be tagged with a unique number identifier, a Bates label. I'm going to take you through the document lifecycle when we talk about organizing documents. So I'm not going to go into much more detail here, but let's just be clear that you're going to take that document, you're going to make a copy of it, you're going to leave the copy in an archive never to be seen again, and then you're going to be working off of a copy of it that you are Bates labeling, right? There needs to be a clean copy somewhere of everything you've ever received, and then a copy that is your working copy. You're going to Bates label it, you're going to produce it, whatever that may be. You want to log this into a database. Now you know the name of the database. In my law firms, it's called the ESI tracking sheet. Everything that comes through the door gets tagged and labeled. This way we know we got it, we know when we got it, we know what we got, and it's ready to be produced. You're then going to move into analyzing the relevance, responsiveness, and utility of the document, privilege, redactions. All of that needs to happen next. But that information is going to be captured in the ESI tracking sheet, because there is no point in undertaking that exercise if the information is then not readily available and retrievable by everybody else in the team. Once you've gone through the evidence, you're obviously going to have to produce it. You're going to produce it to experts. You're going to produce it to the opposing party. It's going to go somewhere, most likely, if it's responsive, and very often it is. That production also needs to be logged into the ESI tracking sheet. And finally, you're going to have to make the ultimate decision. Is this going to be an exhibit to a deposition, to trial? Are you going to attach it to motions? But when those things happen, that information must also be tracked in the ESI tracking sheet. Which takes me to one of the goriest part of this class, client file management. The stories I could tell. Because I have seen all sorts of atrocities committed against documents. So this is a simple to implement, easy to use client file management. It is a little gory because we're going to get into the nitty-gritty, but it is so important for you to be able to do this, understand this, and most importantly, teach this to other people in your team. I had a couple of rules when I was running a law firm. One of them was that if it takes more than 30 seconds to find a document, the system of organizing it is wrong and the paralegal needs to stop. We're done. We are done with people spending 5-10 minutes looking for a document every time they need to pull one. We're done. This is the answer to that pain point. The first thing you have to think about when you're looking at the client folder management is the actual folder structure. What does it look like? And now I'm going to introduce a concept that is so critical. The way you organize documents, evidence, information in your law firm is a mode of communication. What do I mean? When somebody looks at your client file, when somebody clicks on the folder and looks inside, it should communicate to them what is happening in the case, when it happened, who was involved. Client file management is not just about using the folder structure to manage that information. It is also to express it to other people. The ultimate goal would be if somebody in your firm that has never worked on a matter jumps into a client file, they should be able to find files, and importantly, they should be able to understand what has happened in this case just by looking at the titles. This is how you do that. The client file has 3 folders: a case file, a work file, and documents, or documents received or produced. This is my proposed case file structure. There's one on the left, one on the right. The one on the left is more detailed. The one on the right is less detailed. I don't love it, but okay. If that's what we're going to reach for, that's okay. So let's go through it a little bit. Agreements or administration. This is client file. This is a client engagement letter, or contracts with vendors, or contracts with experts. That goes in there. Correspondence. That is where you put your letters. That is where you put the letters you've received and that you've sent. Oh, and let me specify something. I'm sorry, I should have said this earlier. The case file is where you put final copies of everything. The case file is where you put a document when it is never going to be edited again. It is how it arrived to you and how it was sent out into the world. We are no longer going to mix drafts with final work product. And when I say final work product, it doesn't mean just the one that has _final written at the end of the document. It means the one actually left the office, the one that actually made it out. So you're going to have your final agreements as signed. You're going to have letters as received and sent as signed. You're going to have discovery. Oh, not the drafts of your discovery requests, the ones that were actually sent. Do you see where I'm going with this? If you have a properly organized file and somebody wants to know how many requests for production have we sent, that's easy. You go to discovery, requests sent, and you will see all of the RFPs. Okay, well, we've sent out 3 RFPs. There's no more of this work, having your drafts and then the final and then the second final and the amended final. No. This case file is pristine. Then you're going to put your deposition transcripts. You're going to put your hearing transcripts. You're going to put mediation final documents, such as mediation briefs, mediation exhibits, whatever it is. If there's a production, anything that went out during mediation or that you received as a final document. You're going to put your motions. You're going to put your final orders as issued by the court. Then you could put your pleadings and your settlement agreements. This case structure has served me pretty well. Some paralegals, and look, paralegals are the holders of case file management, would prefer it to be less onerous. So I have seen them, for example, put everything that is filed in a folder called docket. I'm not against it. I actually didn't love it when I first came upon it, and I was a little recalcitrant. And then I saw that paralegal who was doing this was doing it beautifully. Everything was named properly. Everything was dated. Everything had the docket number. She was using the docket folder to communicate. And so I thought, oh, that's actually a really good way to implement it. So the shorter version is something we can do as well. It also depends on the complexity of the case that you're handling, right? Because some matters need more things than others. Now we're going to talk about the work file structure. The work file is chaos, a little bit. It's a little bit of chaos. That's okay though, because it is your playground. It is where the work happens. And you will see that it's a very similar structure. Agreements, correspondence, discovery, hearings, mediation, all of that's the same. But the thing is that here's where we put the drafts. Now, we still want the drafts to be properly named, and we're going to talk about that later on in this class, but this can be a little bit more freeform, okay? So this is what I would suggest you implement as your proposed work file structure. And then there is your document folder. And the document folder will have documents from client and document productions, received from OP, received from third parties, or sent out. And in this folder, you are also going to save your production log and your ESI tracking sheet. So let's talk a little bit about how that looks. Now that we've looked at all of these things together, what does that look in practical terms? As promised, this is a file. It's called Course 3 Demos. That's a really weird matter name, but go with me. And it has case file, documents, and work file, which is what I promised you, right? So the case file right here is where you have final versions of everything. The document here is work file, where you have the drafts of everything. We talked about that. And here are the documents. And now we get to put together the case file management system, the ESI tracking sheet, and the document lifecycle into one demo, because this is what it looks like in practice. This folder right here is the folder that I will send the link to the client. So the client will have this link, and it's called Documents from Client, and it's in their case file. They don't see anything else. They just see that link. And when they click on it, they will throw in all sorts of terribly named documents. C to D angry email, a pay stub 2, pay stub 3. I love it. Don't you love it when the clients take pictures of their pay stubs, or even better, of every single page in their bank statement, and then send it to you in individual PNGs or JPEGs? My favorite day. My favorite day of the year is when that happens. Anyway, so here we have it, right? We have all of these documents that get sent in here. All right. So what you will teach your paralegal to do, or you will do, is that you'll say, all right, well, these are the original, right? Perfect. We're going to make a copy. We're going to go to documents. We're going to go into Bates labeled client documents, and we're going to save them in there and Bates label them, which I already did for sake of brevity. And you will see here that we have the exact same documents we had before, and they are now nicely Bates labeled. And we've also put the Bates label number in the title itself, so I have them in order. Wonderful. And this is just going to keep getting longer and longer and longer and longer and longer, but then you will have a universe of every single document that your client sent to you Bates labeled. Going back to documents from client. What will happen is that someone will do this, but then leave these like this. And then you will have a hell of a time trying to figure out, wait, did we Bates label it? Did we transfer it? Did we not? So welcome to the concept of the sweep. We're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it 10/13/2023 sweep. We're then going to take this like this. We're going to move it in there. And that will tell you that on 10/13/2023, we swept all of those documents, we Bates labeled them, we saved them elsewhere, we logged them, they're done. And then your client will be able to dump a whole bunch of new documents in this beautiful white space. And when they do so, and they get processed, let's say that they get processed on the 15th of November, 2023, you will write this, you'll create a new folder, and then you will take all the imaginary next documents and put them in there. And at the end of the case, you'll just have sweep, 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 and anything that is new that the client has provided and nobody has touched yet will be there untouched. Now, I obviously told you that we moved them to the Bates label client documents. Well, did we? Of course we did. And did we log them? Of course we did. We're organized people. We're trying to make the law more livable. And here is the beautiful ESI tracking sheet in its dynamic form. So you will see here that there are the documents that I had before, right? You have C to D angry email, so on and so forth. You have your Bates prefix as promised. This is where usually I like to do it from where they came from. Even importantly, if the other side sends it to you not Bates labeled, Bates label them with with whatever name they have as a prefix, and then they're Bates label for you. I have done that for years, and actually judges really appreciate it, because then the other side comes up with their completely unBates labeled documents, and I have Bates labeled not only mine but theirs too, and it's very organized. Here, a little note. It doesn't matter if you put the zeros ahead of the number or not. You can actually just put the number itself, the actual digits, and it'll organize it for you. One beautiful thing, obviously, here is that you can sort it, and it will show you immediately if you have gaps. if you have gaps, and then you can ask why you have gaps. You can also look at other people's productions and see here, for example, there's a gap of 1 page. You can follow up and say, hey, was that a typo or are we missing a page? Very easy way to make sure that your Bates labeled and productions are complete. You can also organize everything by date, which is a fantastic way to create a timeline for yourself. And you can go through the documents in order. You can figure out very quickly, okay, well, first the goodbye message came, and then 2 months later, there was an employment contract. Oh, and then there was an angry email, whatever that may be, right? Titles. I really like to have a title that is descriptive. I know you're shocked. So I make sure that it says enough. So I'll say what it is, if there's a transaction, if there's a way to describe what it's about. Bank statements was a really common one when I had a family law practice. And so I really like putting the bank, what it is, and then the last 4 digits of the bank account number. And that way you can put them together. It's also really helpful because if you do it in a way that's consistent, you can actually go here and be like, okay, so I have a 1982 and a 2020 bank statement. Okay, and then you can do it again. This one, I only have 1 bank statement, and so on and so forth. And then you can definitely look at when you received a document, who you received it from. If you then produced it, so if it's my own clients, then obviously I will try to produce it to the other side. If and when you produced it to experts, if I have multiple experts, I will actually have multiple columns. You can mark it as attorney client or work product privilege. And if you can sort it by then, you can also create yourself a little privilege log, which is very convenient. For example, here we go. Remove the blanks. I just want this. Boom. This part here is my privilege log. Isn't that nice? And then I can maybe just add this if I wanted to. I can do attorney client, work product, attorney client. And that way I have I can copy paste this portion, and I have a privilege log. So these are all of the ways that the ESI tracking sheet and the document lifecycle come together, because you can see that you can use this at every stage of your of the case management, right? And this little creature obviously is going to live right here with all of your documents. And you will see here that, as promised, again, I have a production from OP. We received it on October 12th of 2023. And then we also produced something to OP on October 12th, 2023. And at the end of the case, you will just have all of these beautifully labeled cases, and you will know exactly what you sent, what you received, so on and so forth. So obviously, I strongly encourage you to use the ESI tracking sheet. I strongly encourage you to use a case file management that follows these guidelines. And then I cannot stress enough to understand and implement the concept of a document lifecycle. So talk a little bit more about naming conventions. Rules. There's rules for everything. I have rules for everything. A document name has to be short but intelligible. You have to be able to tell from the name of a document when, what, who. And this has to be systematic across your entire law firm or group or whoever you have control over, even if it's just you. You have to do this in a way that is organized. Why? Because the less time and effort and energy you have to spend on stuff like looking at what document is where, what document says what document is this, the more chances are that you will stay away from burnout. Burnout is the consumption of your bandwidth. The reason I spent so much time creating a methodology for the management of things is because the mismanagement of things devours your bandwidth and makes everything so much more exhausting, both for you and for your team. Here are some examples. You will see here, Garcia, matter name, date, plaintiffs, motion for contempt. All right, then I know it's the plaintiffs, and I know it's a motion, and I know it's for contempt. Johnson, all caps, date, MSJ, descriptive, intelligible. Don't love this one too much. It's kind of long, but it works. It's okay. You have the date, you have the name of the matter, you have what it is. I would maybe consider abbreviating. Paralegal taught me to do this when I was very junior. 2AC, second amended complaint. I think that was great. First AC, 1AC, 2AC, 3AC. The next one also works. You don't need spaces, you don't need dashes, you don't need underscores. The point is this though, whatever you use, it has to be the same all the time. So this should be part of the onboarding process. This should be part of the training process. This is how we name files. Please do it. And then there's another example, right? It's the first request for reduction from plaintiff to defendant in the Garcia matter. Also perfectly acceptable. There is some preference to having the date first because then you can sort the documents by date. But look, I'm a stickler, but not about this. The way station, in or out universe. We've talked about it a bit because I showed you what it is. It is where the documents get delivered by your client. So we're going to go over that just a little bit more. So as I said, the client has a link to dump their documents in there, and that's okay. It's called documents from client. Then you're going to organize the docs, and then you're going to perform sweeps. And now you know exactly what that looks like, and you know exactly what that means. Okay, that was heavy. That was a lot. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to jump back in onto the second sub-pillar of management of things, which is the drafting process.